Shalom everyone. Recently, I told you that Hamas rejected a proposal by Israel, and that they gave a counterproposal that included a 5 to 7 year truce, rebuilding of Gaza, return of all hostages, release of thousands of terrorists, and no talk of them disarming or disbanding. So obviously, this would result in another October 7th and hundreds or thousands of dead Israelis, and consequently is a non-starter. Yesterday, a report came out that Mahmoud Abbas, Abu Mazen, the dictator president of the Palestinian Authority, harshly responded to Hamas's refusal, stating that they are sons of dogs, or bitches, and must give up their arms and control of Gaza to the Palestinian Authority and release the hostages, that their refusal is harming the Palestinian people. Now, in my mind, this is 18 months too late and far too little. The Palestinian Authority and Mahmoud Abbas have yet to condemn the massacres of October 7th. The Palestinian Authority are terrorists in suits and are no better than the Hamas. In fact, to some degree, they are even worse because, unlike Hamas, that most of the world views as terrorists and as enemies, well, not the progressive world, but generally most of the rational world, many consider the Palestinian Authority to be better than them, to be someone you can negotiate with, someone who could build a state, the two-state solution and all that, and ignore the fact that the Palestinian authorities themselves fund terrorism, lead terrorism, pay to slay, and so on and so forth, and much, much more. Nevertheless, a Saudi journal published yesterday, at 1 a.m. my time, I got the report, a draft containing the full outline for a ceasefire in Gaza. According to the report, efforts by the US, Egypt, and Qatar paved the way for a comprehensive approach aimed at both ending the war and resolving the hostage crisis. The Saudi journal Al-Majalla published on Wednesday evening a draft of a new negotiation framework aimed at reaching a permanent ceasefire agreement in Gaza and a hostage deal between Israel and the terrorist organization Hamas. The draft includes the following 12 articles. Article 1 is as follows. The US, Qatar, and Egypt have come to the understanding that the Hamas will release an Israeli hostage, Idan Alexander, who holds American citizenship on the first day of a ceasefire as a special gesture to the US. Article 2. A temporary ceasefire will be declared for 45 days. This means a cessation of military operations and a temporary halt to aerial movements in the Gaza Strip, during which hostages and Palestinian terrorists will be released. Humanitarian aid will resume, and negotiations for the terms of a permanent ceasefire will begin. My commentary on this is that the cessation of aerial movement in the Gaza Strip is something that I don't believe Israel will be willing to do, except possibly for short windows of time during the hostage release part, because otherwise it will cause Israel to have a blind spot for much of the Hamas activities. Article 3. On the second day, 5 Israeli hostages will be released. In return, 66 terrorists with blood on their hands serving life sentences and 611 Gazans arrested after October 7th, that is, Hamas terrorists, will be released according to an agreed upon mechanism and without the public ceremonies, the blood circuses that Hamas did last time. Article 4. On the second day of the ceasefire, humanitarian aid will resume with a mechanism to keep it out of the hands of Hamas, and infrastructure reconstruction will begin within the Gaza Strip. Article 5. Also on the second day, following the release of 5 live Israeli hostages, the IDF will begin redeployment in Rafah area and the northern Gaza Strip. Article 6. On the third day, negotiations under the mediation of the intermediaries, once again this is US, Qatar, and Egypt, will begin on the required arrangements for a permanent ceasefire, including the number of terrorists to be released in exchange for the remaining hostages, IDF redeployment, the demilitarization of Gaza, post-war arrangements, and the declaration of a permanent ceasefire. Article 7. On the 7th day, 4 more live hostages will be released. In return, 54 terrorists serving life sentences for multiple murders will be released, along with another 500 Gazan terrorists who were arrested since the start of the war. And also this will be done without the blood circus ceremonies. Article 8. On the 7th day, after the release of the 4 living hostages, the IDF will once again redeploy east of the Salah ad-Din Road, which roughly bisects the Gaza Strip. Unrestricted movement will be allowed in the Netzarim corridor. Article 9. On the 10th day, Hamas will provide full information, including evidence and medical reports, on all the remaining hostages in its possession, in exchange for information from Israel regarding Palestinian prisoners, terrorists, detained after October 7th. By the way, on a side note, you might wonder why I make the distinction between hostages and terrorists, because terrorists committed crimes, and hostages are innocents that were taken by criminals. Just, to make it clear. Article 10. On the 20th day, Hamas will hand over 16 coffins containing the bodies of hostages in exchange for 160 bodies of Gazans. The exchange will take place without ceremonies. Article 11. Negotiations on the arrangements for a permanent ceasefire are expected to conclude within 45 days, and upon agreement, the remaining hostages will be released. If negotiations are not completed in that time, but hostages are released, then the ceasefire may be extended. So there's an opening to continue with a similar non-permanent agreement for release of more hostages at the end of the 45 days. Article 12. The mediators will be guarantors. The US, Egypt, and Qatar will make every effort to ensure the completion of negotiation and reach an agreement on all the arrangements for a permanent ceasefire. Now, this is nearly identical, I can hardly see any differences, to the Israeli proposal from last week. And the biggest advantage is that it in no way forces Israel to end the war. Articles 11 and 12 clearly state that by what they say and what they don't say. And that's what I have to say about this very interesting agreement that I suppose I would be in favor of, because it would return quite a few of the hostages, a total of 26, 10 living, 16 dead. That is nearly half of the current hostages, and it would be good to get them back. Let's quickly move on to a brief update about the wildfires in Israel. Yesterday around noon, fires broke out in the Judean Hills and spread very quickly. It's the fastest spread ever recorded in Israel. 71 firefighting teams and a dozen planes worked to control the fires. As of this morning, the fires are not yet put out, but are mostly contained. 2 firefighters were injured, and other than that, no civilians and hardly any damage was done. Thank God for that. Today is the Holocaust Memorial Day, and I want to in particular mention one thing that I noticed, and we'll talk much more about it on next week's episode, but the embassy in Tel Aviv of the United Arab Emirates, which is surprising to me that there even is one, expressed its sadness over the Holocaust Memorial Day, and that they will not forget the horrors of the past and will work towards a better future. Like I said, next week we'll talk more about this coming from the United Arab Emirates and the changes in the Middle East landscape. But on this solemn day, we must remember what the Nazis did to us and what they wanted to do. And also remember the spiritual connection. Pharaoh, Haman, and others have tried to destroy God's people. Hamas and Iran want us destroyed. Satan wants us destroyed. But we must remember, we must pray, and we must fight. Never again. Am Yisrael Chai. Shalom.